Good morning, Jim, and good morning, Rutherford County. We are excited to be here this morning to share what God has done in our lives. And this morning, it's going to be my wife, Cindy, sharing, and I will be sharing later on this week. So we're just excited to be here. And Cindy, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. I wanted to say hello to everybody and thank you for listening today. And I was born in Ocala, Florida, and at a very early age, my mom and dad were divorced. I was somewhere around 4 years old, and I don't remember much about my dad after that. I didn't see him very much, but my mom went on to marry a second man. His name was Gary, and I would have to say this was a turning point in the way I felt towards people and towards life, even towards men. He was very abusive, and I remember just a couple things that he had did. If my mom spent too much money on groceries, I remember him putting a gun to her head. And I think I was around 6 years old when I saw that. And there were many times that they fought a lot. I saw him abuse my other sisters, and we were told to go out the window and run next door through the woods to a neighbor to get help. And there were many times that we tried to slip out of the house and pretty much trying to get away from him, and he would always catch us, bring us back, and start the abuse again. So I think that went on about a year or so, and my mom divorced him. In between that divorce, my mom's brother Gary, and then her ex-husband Gary, got into a very, very bad car crash, and it killed my Uncle Gary. So for some reason, my mom remarried this abusive man, and it started all over again. We moved to Fort Lauderdale, and again, things did not work out. I just pretty much I shut down and just was in my own little world. I think all of us, by that time, there was 5 girls, and we were all very close in age. Me and my older sister about 10 months apart. So anyways, we were in Fort Lauderdale. It was not working out. So my mother, my grandma and grandpa took us in. And by that time, I believe my mom was drinking pretty heavily, because she always told us by the time she was in her late 20s, she was an alcoholic. And which she and I are about 20 years apart. So when we lived with Grandma and Grandpa, it seemed like everything was wonderful. It was, you had simple things like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you didn't get screamed at or hit if you didn't eat your food, or it just was a normal life. I worked a lot with Grandpa in the garden. We started coming out of our shell, so to speak, as far as things started becoming normal again.
Now, how many other children were in your family?
There was a total of 5 girls, and so my grandma, and grandpa to take in 5 children to me was a miracle in itself. There was talk about us being fostered out, but that never happened. And my mom's parents also had 5 children. So, they just raised 5 children, then they took on 5 more children. So, anyways, we did a lot of playing, and things seemed to look good. And that's the first time I started going to church. My grandpa was in church all the time, but my grandma, I never understood why my grandma never went until later on in life. So that lasted about 3 years, and my mom got into some real estate and got enough money and bought a small little house on Lake Owens. It wasn't directly on the lake. It was kind of set off the lake. So I wasn't real happy about moving there. I was very close to my grandpa, but in between all that, my grandpa passed away several years after we moved into that house. And again, I just shut down again. The fighting that went on typically with 5 girls. My mom was heavily into the partying, and which to me was, this was the setup. You have no mom, you have no dad, and a lot of drinking. And pretty soon those parties started coming to our house. And so I remember mixing drinks, for the people that were there, and taking a sip here and taking a sip there. And my younger sister was already...
How old were you when all this was taking place?
I'd say about 12, 13, somewhere around there.
And your other sisters, how old were they?
Well, my older sister and I were 10 months apart, and there was 5 girls in about 6 to 7 years. So we were pretty young. And I remember my mom drinking so much that she, passed out, and we pretty much carried the party over, so to speak, just the music and the dancing, and it just seemed like it just went on and on and on. And week after week, and actually I started looking forward to the parties. I could take my mom's car before I even had my driver's license, and I could go get things at the store for her, and kind of took advantage of the drinking scene and everything. So anyways, from that point Mom took us to R-rated movies, and we also went to the bars with her. And we ended up dancing with the older men, and just had that kind of setting around us for a long period of time. I remember one of the R-rated movies, I saw my first rape on the movie, and that really, really bothered me. So she continued to party and had a lot of guy friends, and there was many times that we had a basement, and we slept down in the basement, and I would come up, and there'd be several men passed out on the floor, passed out on the couch, and like I said, it was just a very strong partying atmosphere. And I just always longed to have that security with a mom and dad again. I always looked for that all my life, and thought I had it when I was with Grandma and Grandpa. And then when he passed away, like I said, I just shut down tremendously, and continued that pattern. And I guess around 17, really from my 11th grade year to my 12th grade year is when I started heavily into the drinking. Maybe before that, maybe 16, real heavy in the drinking. And I found out my Uncle Pat was a drug dealer out in the National Forest, and he had pretty much everything that we needed. So we stopped in, and on my way to the beach or anywhere, and I poured myself a baggie of Quaaludes, and got my bags of marijuana, and we'd head to the beach, and we thought we were all set, had lots of friends, and always seem to have friends when you have drugs. But I was so miserable inside. I hated doing those drugs, especially with what you did while you did those drugs. But anyways, by the time I was a senior, I was getting high at school, and trying to function was so far beyond. I don't even know how I graduated. I pretty much cheated my way through school. Just my friends helped me. I couldn't even hardly carry on a conversation. I had several, just actually one dear friend, her name was Pokey, and she helped me out a tremendous amount. And there was not a lot of money in our family, and she always gave me money every day so I'd have something to eat. And a lot of the times I went to her house on the weekends, and pretty much because I wanted to eat and have someone that liked me and someone that took care of me. And so by the time I graduated, I was in a relationship, and my mom did not like him at all. So she threw a big party for me, and I went off to Atlanta, Georgia, and I got into worse drugs there. I started cocaine when I got to Atlanta, and
Now, what were you going to Atlanta to do?
I was going to Atlanta. She thought I could start modeling, but when I got there, they pretty much, the more you took off, the more you could model, and I didn't want to do that, and I was grateful that, I still had conviction, in my heart, because most of it was gone. And I only stayed in Atlanta for about 6 months, and I was popping pills and, doing a lot of cocaine. And I decided to come back to Ocala, and, the very first thing that happened to me was I got a job at Paul Corporation, and that's where my husband Steve worked. But before I met Steve, I was at the height of my drugs and partying and sleeping from one house to the next, and me and my mother were not getting along at all. So the first thing that happened was I got in trouble with the law for shoplifting, me and a couple of my sisters, and I had to spend a night in jail, and that was an eye-opener for me. And I got in front of the judge, and I had 20 days for shoplifting. And my mom was there, and my mom's boyfriend, and pretty much they begged for him not to put me in jail. And so anyways, I got a large fine for that. I think that was around 1980 or 81. And the very next year, I actually got down to about 98 pounds, and every cocaine party I could find, and every bar, I'd look forward to every bar I could go to. I was working, but every single penny went to drinking and to the cocaine. And by the next year, I think I just turned 18, maybe 19, and I got in trouble for trafficking, and it was, I believe, 5 or 6 felonies. It was trafficking cocaine and quaaludes and marijuana, and that took about 2 years to go to court for that, and it was an eye-opener for me, just having to wait that long, and you just, all you did was look over your shoulder because of who I got in trouble with. Was a very, very bad person to get in trouble with. He was from Colombia, and I feared for my life for about 2 years. And finally, when I went to court, the judge said, you've got 30 years, Cindy, and I'll take 10 right off the top, but what do you want me to do with those other 20? And I just begged him. I said, I will not do this again. I promised him I wouldn't do it again. And I got 5 years probation and a $2,500 fine. But I still could not stop the cocaine. And I continued that until I had to start taking urine test, and pretty much you wanted to stay clean because you didn't want to go to jail. You didn't want to finish that time in jail. So by that time, I started straightening up, but still drinking my alcohol. And anyways, to go back to that job that I got, that's where I met Steve. But like I said, my drinking was still very bad, and I ended up getting fired from that job. They did not feel like their attorneys should keep me because of all the trouble that I caused outside of the workplace, yes, pretty much. And so anyways, before I did get fired, me and Steve started talking, and he was in a relationship and I was in a relationship, and I didn't care about people. I didn't care about relationships. The one I was in was very abusive, and all I wanted to do was just stay high and go from bar to bar and party to party. And but I'll have to say he was the first nice person in my life. That was really, I saw men as, all they wanted was, sex or your drugs or, to party with you. So that was always, or they wanted to abuse you. There was really, I never saw anybody or knew anybody that was nice. And so I met Steve, and I thought, this cannot be real, giving you money to get gas in your car, or just being able to talk to somebody and open up your heart, and without feeling any attachments with it. And so in a course of events, he broke up with his friend, and I broke up with my friend, and we became friends. But he had a lot of baggage, and I had a lot of baggage, and even when I did meet him, I'd met him, and when I got busted for drugs, he really couldn't believe, or his mom couldn't believe that I was even in that kind of stuff. But he was a pretty heavy drinker, very heavy drinker. And did you want to say anything here? Yeah, no? Okay. And anyways, he just shared about the alcohol that, that he drank. And so anyways, my mom was still trying to get rid of, get me out of town, and even suggested I go to Hawaii to be with an older sister to get straightened up. I didn't feel good about that, and actually I got my ticket bought, but I still really didn't want to go. And that's when Steve proposed to me.
Yeah, I want to say something here. Yeah, when I found out that she was going to go to Hawaii to visit her sisters, I felt inside that was it. If she gets on that plane and goes to Hawaii, I would never see her again. So I got with my sister, my older sister, which we were down in Orlando then, and I said, I need to get her a ring. I need to take her to the fanciest French restaurant that I know of, and I'm going to propose to her before she gets on that plane and leaves. And that's exactly what I did, and she said yes.
And what was amazing to me is he asked my mom if he could marry me, and I never in a million years, thought that would, it just wasn't normal to me. Being nice was not normal to me. And anyways, so we got married, and we had Brent 2 years after we got married. And Brent is pretty much the child that broke us from a lot of things. I mean, he was like pretty much our guinea pig as far as, we didn't know how to be parents. I mean, I never had a mom or a dad, and Steve's parents were alcoholics, so it was a trying time to learn how to be parents. And
right, we were trying in our ability
Yeah.
not to do the things that our parents did to us. There was no God, there was no Jesus, there was nothing, but we tried, and we tried.
Yeah, we tried. And anyways, God, through all this, I know his hand was on me, because the times that I could have gone to jail, but he started pulling me in to find him again right after I had Brent.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a church, Heartland Worship Center, and
In St. Cloud.
in St. Cloud, and I started finding who Jesus was really about, and I got pregnant again with Kayla, and I had her too early, and she lived about 2 or 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very devastating time. I really was ready just to give up again. It just seemed like every time you tried to find Jesus, the devil was right there to destroy your life and turn you back to where you used to be and what you used to be like. And I don't know, God's grace just kept us through that. And it was a very hard time. So anyways, we got through losing a child, and God moves us to another city.
That was in 1988, and about 2 months later, God used my job, and they came to me and said, we've got an opening in Thomasville, Georgia. I was working in Orlando, Florida. And they said, and I went to Cindy, I said, they've got an opening. Do you want to move? And she, no hesitation. Yes, let's move. So God got us out of Orlando and brought us to a small town in Thomasville, Georgia in 1989.
Yes.
And that was a miracle right there.
So we ended up in Thomasville, met some really nice people, and started going to church and trying to find the right church. And I just
We started going to an Assemblies of God church.
yeah, and started finding Jesus again, and started getting stronger with God. But some of the one church that we went to, there was some things that were going on there that were not right, and I knew that the way that I wanted to feel, the peace still wasn't there, the deliverance still wasn't there. And my older sister started going to a church up here in North Carolina and invited me to a seminar, and I went first, and Steve didn't want to go.
And that was in 1991.
Yeah. And so I went up here, and I'll never forget, we opened up the back door of the sanctuary, and everybody inside was praying very strong, and all I felt was the love of God. And everything that I felt, I knew this was the place that was going to help me. I didn't know how, but I knew that this was the only place. So I got prayer, and I got to talk to some of the ministers about some of the things that went on in my life. And I went back and I said, Steve, you got to come up here. It'll help us. And he came up, about a year later?
Yeah.
About a year later. And we've met some of the nicest, most wonderful people. And one of the scriptures that God gave me was, and actually through my course of walking and trying to find Jesus, Philippians 1:6, about he who began a good work in me will continue until the day of Jesus Christ. And he's going to continue a good work right up till the day Jesus comes. If you're submitted and your will is submitted, he'll help you all the way up till he comes. And that was one of my favorite scriptures. There was always a song that was sang at that one church, and me and Steve would always sing it sometimes, especially when we lost Kayla. And then when I got up here, I started realizing that that you can be loved, and you can feel love the right way. And so I went after that with all my heart. I thought, this feels too good, and who could turn it away? And I don't understand, a lot of my family has left, and the love that, I couldn't trade, the love that I feel for anything that's out there in that world. And God's given me a wonderful, wonderful sister. Her name is Brooke, and she's helped me through everything that I could possibly ever think of or go through. And I love her dearly. And Mom Jane and Papa Sam, they're my parents, and because they've laid their lives down and they have fought to put the word into us and help us through many things. And I can't exchange the love that I feel for anything. But the other scripture was in Luke 8:21 about who are my mother and my brothers. And it's the ones that do the will of God. It's the ones that want Jesus. I mean, I can't flow out there in the world anymore. I can't be around the drugs and the alcohol and the partying. I found people that are real, that are stable, and that's what I want to be now. And it's helped me out a lot. So, if you're out there, God can deliver you, and anytime you want, just set your heart to find Jesus, and He'll meet you where you're at and help you all the way through.
1993 was the first time I came up here, and we moved in 95.
Yes.
And there was no turning back from God. I mean, what God has done in our lives, it's so tangible and so real. That was the question that I had in my life growing up the whole time, is there's got to be more to life than just this, than just going to church and going to work, and there's got to be more. And when we came up here, God was real. God was getting to our hearts. He showed us the purpose for our lives. And
Yes.
it was just, it's so real. I mean, Jesus is real. Jesus helps us every day. And if you'd like to see our previous programs, we've got a website at wordoffaithfellowship.org, and you can see our previous broadcasts that have been online to go back through the archives. Like I said earlier, I will be sharing my testimony later this week. I just want to thank you for listening, and we thank you for the opportunity to come and share.